Cuisinart presents Patently Easy Food Processor Cooking with your host, Greg Patton.
Hi, I'm Greg Patton, and welcome to my kitchen. Today we're going to be doing an old-fashioned hamburger dinner for six with all the trimmings, including the meat patties, some wonderful hamburger buns, sliced onion and tomato, coleslaw, and French fries. And for dessert, a fabulous fresh strawberry ice cream that you make in an instant. The food processor does quick work of all these wonderful recipes, and I want to start off by making the hamburger for you. This is round steak, basically very, very lean, and what you want to do whenever you make hamburger at home is to trim all of the fat away from the lean and then add back to the lean a certain percentage of fat. Store-bought hamburger typically can contain up to 30% fat, and we've found that for the best results, 15 to 20% fat is all you need. So by making your own hamburger, you can significantly reduce the calorie count. Chuck is another popular cut because of its taste, but when you work with chuck, you'll have to cut away all of this fat that you can see running through the meat here before you can actually use the fat and the meat in your particular recipe. And then here is a very lean cut of meat. This is a baron of beef roast, and if you were buying this, then you would have to buy an extra source of fat to add to the meat. Here is beef suet, and this comes from the kidney region of the cow, and it's very waxy. And I have found that if you're very kind to your butcher, that butchers are more than willing to accommodate you whenever you need to buy some suet. Sometimes they even give it to me for free. Interestingly enough, it is the quality of the fat that goes into the meat that gives the meat its particular taste. So you can use a cheap cut of meat, get an expensive quality fat, and have yourself a great tasting hamburger without very much cost. Now, to prepare the suet, you cut it up into half-inch cubes, and then that's ready to be processed. If you are concerned about saturated fats, then instead of using the suet, you can substitute for the amount of meat that we'll be doing 1/4 cup of oil and add a little bit of water to it. And I'm using polyunsaturated oil if I were to use this in making the hamburger. We're going to be making today the equivalent of about 2 pounds of hamburger. And what you need to do to have processing work for you properly is that you trim all the fat from the meat, and then you cut the meat into 1-inch cubes, and you put the meat in the freezer for about 30 minutes, just until the meat becomes chilled, but not until it's frozen solid. And you'll need 1.5 pounds of meat for 5 to 6 ounces of suet. The meat should be in 1-inch cubes, the suet should be in about 1/2-inch cubes, and both should be well chilled. Then, with the metal blade in place, you add the meat and the suet, and if you weren't using the suet, then you could add the oil, and also about 1/2 cup of water straight to the work bowl, and then some seasoning. In this case, I'm just putting in some pepper. If you were going to use salt, I'd suggest 1 teaspoon, but I don't really think salt is necessary. And then to process, you turn the machine on and on rapidly about 3 or 4 times. And this starts the processing going, and then you just let the machine run continuously for about 5 seconds. And that's just about all there is to it. What you have to do first is to scrape down the work bowl to make sure that the meat and the fat are getting chopped together, and never exceed the capacity of your work bowl recommended by your manufacturer. This is a larger than standard work bowl, so I'm able to use 2 pounds of meat and fat combined. And then you just keep turning the machine on and off until you get the desired texture. You don't want a puree, you don't want a mush, you want chopped meat. And here, there, this is a perfect texture. The meat is chopped finely, and so is the suet, and now we're ready to go on and form meat patties. Make your patties at least 3/4 of an inch thick, and shape them gently because that can affect the texture. I'm cooking them in 2 skillets with a little bit of oil over high heat initially, then you turn the heat down to medium-high, and for medium rare, I'd recommend, say, 2 minutes to 3 minutes on a side. And then for seasoning, a low-sodium seasoning, and a delicious one, is just to sprinkle each of the patties as they cook with just a light amount of Worcestershire sauce. Flip them over, cook them on the second side, and then get them on a platter, decorate with parsley, and then serve them just as soon as possible. I'm serving the hamburgers with delicious homemade cheddar cheese cornmeal buns. And to make them, you begin with 1/4 cup of warm water, add a tablespoon or a package of active dry yeast, and just a pinch of sugar. Stir up this mixture, and then let it sit until it gets good and foamy, until it looks like this. And when the yeast foams up like that, you know that the yeast cells are alive and are well, and now we're ready to proceed with the rest of the recipe. While the yeast is becoming bubbly or proofing itself, get ready 2½ ounces of sharp cheddar cheese, and if you don't have a scale, 2½ ounces measures about 3 inches long by 1¼ inches by 1¼ inches. And then with the shredding disc in place in your food processor, put this well-chilled cheese into the feed tube, and then process using light pressure. Then, take the metal blade of your food processor and put it in place and make sure that it sits securely on the drive shaft. And then add 3½ cups of unbleached all-purpose flour, or 17½ ounces by weight, 1/3 cup of cornmeal, 2 tablespoons of sugar, a teaspoon of salt, and then 3 tablespoons of butter that's at room temperature cut into sixths. And then what you want to do is to turn this machine on and let all the dry ingredients process for about 20 seconds to chop the cheese. Then take the wonderful bubbly yeast mixture and pour it over the dry ingredients, and add a cold egg. And why an egg should be cold will be explained a bit later as we process the bread. And then take some hot pepper sauce and shake about 5 drops of it for some zip into 3/4 cup of ice cold water. And now we're ready to turn these dry ingredients into bread dough. So you start the machine going, and then you pour this liquid slowly through the feed tube in a stream as fast as the flour will absorb it. And then you just simply time 45 to 60 seconds of kneading. If the dough is too wet, add flour by tablespoons through the feed tube, and if it's too dry, add water by teaspoons through the feed tube. And you want to make sure you add cold liquids so that the yeast cells are not killed should the temperature in the food processor work bowl get too high. There. And let me test this dough. It is barely sticky. And I'm going to take this out of the work bowl. It's okay if it is barely sticky. You want it to be really stretchy and elastic, and please be very careful when working with a metal blade. No hand kneading is necessary. All you need to do is to take this dough, put it into a lightly floured plastic bag, and then you just simply twist all of the air out and let the dough rise in this plastic bag. And over here, I'll show you what happens. Here is some risen dough, and here's a reason for twisting all of the air out of the bag. That is that during rising, carbon dioxide is going to form and fill the space left in the plastic bag. So you want to let this dough rise in a warm place for about 1.5 hours or so until it is double in bulk. And then punch the dough down, still in the plastic bag, and then cut it up into 10 equal pieces. To shape these buns, you take each piece of dough and just work it in your hands to form a ball, and then you pinch this little ball of dough that forms on the bottom, and then turn that upside down, and you just keep doing this until all 10 pieces of dough are shaped into little balls. And then you take your fingers and you flatten these balls of dough out into little circles, measuring about 3½ inches or so in diameter. And then you place 5 circles to a pan. This happens to be a jelly roll pan that is greased and sprinkled very lightly with cornmeal, and you want to press these down firmly in the cornmeal so that they take hold. This helps to make these buns rise better. Okay, so this is just one pan. Then you cover them with a towel and let them rise in a warm place until they look like this. They should be puffy and light and doubled in size. And to give them a beautiful glaze, take one large egg, beat it up with a teaspoon of water, and then you just brush the glaze all over these beautiful puffy rolls. To bake these buns, adjust 2 oven racks to divide the oven in thirds, and then preheat your oven to 375 degrees. And then you want to bake these buns for about 15 to 20 minutes. And be sure that you rotate the position of the baking sheets from top to bottom and front to back once during baking, about halfway through, so that the buns brown evenly. Once the buns are baked, transfer them to cooling racks and let them cool before you dig in. What would a hamburger dinner be without French fried potatoes? Well, I don't know, and that's why we're going to be making French fries today. I'm going to show you how to do them 2 ways, but before that, let me show you something about the potato you should use. Always buy baking potato or Idaho russets for French fries. They're mealy and they're great for frying and also for mashing. The 2 ways that you can make French fried potatoes with a food processor: one way is to use the French fry disc, which has little squares about 1/4 of an inch on each side. And these will cut French fries for you very easily. With the disc in place, take a potato that will fit the size of your feed tube, and then with firm pressure, process. And here's what you'll get. You'll get wonderful French fries about 1/4 of an inch on a side, but they'll be slightly curved. Now, what if you can't get a French fry cutter for your processor? There is another way of making French fries, and that is the double slicing technique. And for that, you will need a thick slicing disc. This is the thickest slicing disc that I can get for this food processor, and it measures about 1/3 of an inch deep. Put one potato in, and then with firm pressure, we'll slice it. And then add a second potato, and we'll repeat the procedure. And then that's sliced one way. Then you take your potato slices out, and you reassemble them into a stack, and then you put them into the feed tube one more time, but at 90 degrees, at a 90-degree angle to the first cut. That way you will get straight French fries, and if they don't all go in through the top, remember the old trick of going through the bottom. And then we process, again with firm pressure. There. And then you see what you get are sticks. Then I'm going to add these to some that I prepared earlier. For 6 people, you'll need about 3 pounds of potatoes. And this is going to be a low-calorie fry because we're not really going to use deep oil for it. We're going to use 3 tablespoons of oil for 3 pounds of potatoes. And the oven frying method assures you of a low-calorie result, but also a very crispy result as well. So take a large cookie sheet. This one measures about 14 by 17 inches. Oil it lightly, and then get your potatoes out. Try to get them out in about 1 layer. If they overlap each other a bit, it's okay. And then you preheat the oven to 450 degrees and adjust the oven rack to the upper third position. And I have here, sizzling away, 1 batch of potatoes so that I can show you what they look like after they come out. You'll want to bake these potatoes for about 30 minutes in the upper third, stirring them from time to time so that they will brown evenly. And when they are done, here is what you'll have. Gorgeous golden brown French fries, much lower in calories than the typical French fries, and everyone will just love digging into these. Coleslaw goes beautifully with hamburgers, and today I'm going to make a special one for you consisting of green cabbage, red cabbage, and also some carrots. It'll be a three-tone coleslaw. Also, for those of you who care about such things, it's going to be relatively low in calories, and also will be very low in sodium since this contains no salt at all. And you begin by basically starting out to make a mayonnaise, and so with the metal blade in place in the work bowl, break an egg into the work bowl and add a tablespoon of oil and a tablespoon of cider vinegar and a teaspoon and a half of sugar and a half teaspoon of celery seed. And then for a bit of bite, 2 teaspoons of Dijon mustard, just a dash of Tabasco, not too much, and then a grinding of white pepper, about 1/8 of a teaspoon or so. And then what we're going to want to do is just start the machine and let this run for about a minute until everything is well mixed. Whenever you're making mayonnaise, be sure that you let those first few ingredients run together for about a minute, get processed together, so that by the time you start pouring in the oil, and in this case I'm pouring in 1/3 of a cup of safflower oil, the initial mixture is ready to accommodate it. And by that I mean that the mayonnaise will not separate. After all the oil is added, then it's time to scrape the work bowl. And this is just sort of a saucy mayonnaise. It's not really very thick because we've added very little oil. And then to cut the calories, you add a half cup of plain yogurt, unflavored yogurt. And to mix that in, whenever you're mixing yogurt in the food processor, just turn the machine on and off rapidly, just about 3 times until everything is thoroughly mixed. And what we really accomplished here is we've made the dressing for our coleslaw without having to dirty an extra bowl. Because now what we're going to do is to go and process the cabbage and the celery right into the work bowl without having to dirty any other bowl in addition. And I want to show you what to do about the coleslaw. In this case we have red and green cabbage. You're going to need about a 1/2 pound of cabbage for each. If you don't have a scale, the easiest thing to do is to record the weight of the cabbage when you buy it at the supermarket. These heads happen to be about 2 pounds each. And so I'm just going to cut off about 1/4 of each head, cut the top right off, and then cut that top in half crosswise. I'm going to do the same thing for the green cabbage, and then we'll be in a position to process those 2 cabbages. Now for processing, and for getting the wonderful fine cabbage shreds that I know I like, and I know that a lot of people like, get yourself the thinnest slicing disc that your processor comes with. This is a 1 millimeter slicing disc. It's going to make things about 1/24 of an inch thick. And then take your cabbage wedges and get them into the feed tube, 1 or 2 at a time, however many can fit in at once. Within about 30 seconds or so, all the cabbage should be processed. And I'm going to add now this very last wedge of cabbage. And here we go. Now, once all the cabbage is done, we can take out the slicing disc. And then for the carrots, I don't want the carrots to be sliced. I want them to be shredded. And I think to be consistent with the texture of the cabbage, I'm using a fine shredding disc. And if you can get one for your processor, all the better. If not, just use the shredding disc that comes with your machine. And take a medium carrot, cut it into lengths that fit the feed tube, and then just use firm pressure on carrots because carrots are a hard vegetable. Now that's all there is to the coleslaw. The rest of it consists of turning everything out of this work bowl right into your serving bowl, and it's absolutely gorgeous. There's this thick, tangy dressing that I think you will like a lot. And one thing that you should remember about this salad is to toss it very, very thoroughly. And once everything is tossed together, it'll look like this, and everybody will go wild over it. In order for you to process onions and tomatoes in the food processor by getting slices, it's important that you buy onions that will fit the feed tube and tomatoes that will fit the feed tube. And when you buy tomatoes, make sure that the tomatoes feel firm, but ripe, but not soft or mushy. And for the onions, we'll want to use the medium slicing disc, which means that it'll slice onions into slices 3 or 4 millimeters thick. Put the onion in vertically, and then with medium pressure, process. Okay. Then we will turn these onions out onto my work surface here. And then I'm going to change from the medium slicing disc over to the thick slicing disc. And by thick slicing, I mean slices that will be about 6 millimeters in thickness. Okay. Then take your tomatoes, get them into the feed tube, and since tomatoes are soft, use light pressure. And now all we have to do is to assemble the platter. So here is the tomato and onion platter. We're going to be doing a sensationally easy and delicious strawberry ice cream to top off our hamburger dinner. If it's not strawberry season, you can use frozen ones, but if it is strawberry season, buy small ones, freeze them whole. If you can't get fresh strawberries, use a 20-ounce package of frozen unsweetened strawberries. Here I have 2 pints of fresh strawberries that I froze. With a metal blade in place, put these berries in the work bowl, and then you'll turn the machine on and off a few times just to pulse it to get things going, and then let it run for a few seconds until the berries are coarsely chopped. And this is going to make a lot of noise. And then take the plastic scraper and scrape the top of your work bowl cover because the strawberries tend to go all over the place. Add a 1/3 cup sugar and a teaspoon of lemon juice. Scrape the side of the work bowl just to make sure that everything is going to get well mixed. And then process this again for a few seconds until the berries are finely chopped. Then scrape the bowl one more time, and as you can see here, we have very finely chopped frozen berries. And to turn this into ice cream, we need just one more ingredient, 1 cup of heavy cream. So start the machine and pour in the cream. And as the cream becomes incorporated, the mixture goes around and around and around and literally freezes the cream. And once all the cream is added, stop the machine one more time, give everything a final scrape, and you can see that the mixture is very, very thick. It is indeed an ice cream almost at this point. And to turn it into the ice cream, we'll process this for 5 seconds more only, and then it'll be ready to serve. And that, believe it or not, is all there is to it. Here we have our delicious, homemade, fresh strawberry ice cream ready to be put into a bowl or into a cone. I would suggest that you turn it into a large serving dish, decorate it with some fresh strawberries and a sprig of mint if you happen to have one, and there's our glorious dessert. And that's how we make an old-fashioned hamburger dinner the easy way with a food processor. This is Greg Patton, wishing you happy cooking and delicious eating.